and I decided to get into the nutrition industry. And about a couple of years ago, I approached a friend of mine now, a good friend of mine, who is very well known in Kansas City and across the country, that traveled on the cruise ships, being funny. He's a wonderful guy. And I told him about what we did, and he says, I think I'd like to try your products. So that's basically 2 years ago, and I'll let him tell his testimony to you, because it's because of your formulas that we're talking here today. And I'm going to introduce you to David Naster. And David, meet my good friend and business partner, Durk Pearson.
Hey, Durk, nice to meet you, man.
Hi, good to hear from you.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, they got me going here on a. I interviewed Greg. And when we just had a real fun time talking, and then I see all these products on the wall behind him, and I said, "Greg, what are those?" After we'd done interviewing, and he told me, and so then I did an interview with him and Michelle, and they broke all this stuff down, and that got me focused on being healthy, and then I started the lift, the mind, the muscle memory, and
Life Shield.
The Life Shield. Ageless wasn't out yet by then, and I did all this stuff, and that focused me, and I'm 60 pounds lighter now and so much more healthy.
Oh, terrific. Yeah. Really glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And I told him that, I said, it's noticeable, the difference in his life. And I was so proud of him because, a lot of times people don't think they need supplements. And, Dave is different. He knew that he needed more than his food. And luckily he found Life Priority and your formulas. And I said, I'd love to introduce you to Durk someday. And then today's the day. So we've kind of set you up. We've sent you different areas that we'd like you to talk about, because I think that it'll solidify a lot of the things that I've told him. But I said, look, there's nothing like talking to Durk, and he's going to clue us in on why he did what he did and why he continues to do it. So, Durk, thank you for joining us.
Glad to do it.
You ready? Let's rock and roll, man. You ready to go? I know you are.
Yeah, sure am.
So, Durk, I have to know, because I know you went to MIT, and I know that you had, these different majors. What got you to want to go to MIT and spark all that to study what you studied?
Well, I thought that MIT was the best university that I could go to, and I'm very happy that I went there. It was awfully expensive, but it was worth every cent of it.
But before that, what got you to go there as a kid? Were you interested in science and biology, studying of the brain, the body?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I sure was. In fact, I remember when I was a real little kid in the playpen, I was extremely ill. It was bacterial pneumonia, though I didn't know what that was at the time. And I was drifting in and out of consciousness. And the doctor showed up with a black bag, and he said, he may die, but I've got something here that may work. It was a yellowish brown stuff in a little bottle that he injected into me, and a few hours later, I felt so much better. It was unbelievable. And what it was penicillin. I was born in 1943, and I was real sick in like 1946, and penicillin had just become available for civilian use. Previously, all of it had been going to the war front for treating people with wounds. And I found that absolutely amazing what that did, and I wanted to understand what it was and why it worked and how it worked, in case I ever got really sick again.
Okay, and where do I get one of those little black bags? That's what I'm thinking. Where do I get one? Hey, so
yeah, I'm afraid doctors don't make house calls anymore. Yeah. Those were very different days.
Yeah, they were. So when you were studying at MIT, and I read that you had, before you wrote Life Extension with Sandy, I read that you had enough credits that you could have gotten a degree. Was it in biology and psychology? Do I have that correct?
Actually, I did a triple major: physics, biology, and psychology, and a triple minor: computer science, electrical, electronic engineering, and chemistry.
And is that?
I came from.
You came from what?
I came from a relatively poor family, and MIT was very expensive back then. It cost per semester, about for the brand new American-made four-door car would cost per semester.
At the time.
And I realized there's no way. At the time, and I realized there was no way I could afford to go to graduate school. My father and mother just didn't earn anywhere near that much. And when I found out that at MIT, at least at the time, there was no limit on the number of courses you could take, other than how many you could take without flunking out, and they didn't charge you per course. Once you were taking the minimum amount, the rest of it was free.
Good taken. And when you have all these majors and all the stuff you're doing, obviously there's something in there that's really turning you on, that you're excited about doing this. It's really stimulating your brain to get more information and knowledge, eh?
That's right. Yeah, there's an awful lot of nights when I stay up a lot later than I intended because I found a bunch of a series of interesting papers at the National Library of Medicine, and one thing leads to another, to another, to another, to another. It's like Christmas every day.
Wow.
There's new goodies under the tree and an unlimited number of them.
And while you're doing this, what sparked you to go, I've got to write the book with Sandy, Life Extension? You know, was that written for doctors?
Well, actually, it was written for scientists that were not in the field of aging research, and it was written for doctors and intelligent laypersons that were willing to work a bit harder than they might have expected in order to understand the material. We thought we'd be very lucky if 10,000 copies of it sold, and we were absolutely blown away when it sold 1 million copies in hardback and another 1 million copies in paperback.
Wow. Worldwide.
Excuse me?
I said that would have been worldwide too, not just in the United States. I'm assuming it went all over the world.
Yeah, it was translated into French and sold in Europe, and I know that it was translated into one of the Southeastern Asia languages. Most of it was sold in the United States. It was a pretty expensive book. The hardback was $29.50, and $29.50 in 1982 dollars is a little over $100 nowadays.
Wow!
And
wow.
It's mind-boggling that a book that cost the equivalent of a little over $100 nowadays, that 1 million copies sold.
Now, did you ever imagine that you and Sandy would go on your book tour that Warner put you on nationwide?
We had no idea of how books were sold. We got put on the book tour, and it was really arduous. The first tour we were on, we were out for nearly a month, and we came back totally exhausted.
And
that's why we ended up creating the lift. I'll get into that in a minute, but let me tell you about the first designer food we invented. That was mind.
Okay.
And the reason we call them designer foods is that they're foods they're made out of nutrients, they're not drugs, but they're designed to have a specific physiological and biochemical effect. In the case of the mind, it was specifically designed to provide your brain with the raw materials and cofactors needed to make more acetylcholine. Now, acetylcholine isn't a drug. It's what's called a neurotransmitter. It's something that's naturally made in your body, and it's used for sending nerve signals across a synapse. And it's what makes muscles contract, but it's also involved particularly in verbal behavior and organization. And the reason we invented that we were writing Life Extension, a practical scientific approach, before we got our first home computer. It was she was writing things on a typewriter. I was writing things out longhand, and she's very, very smart, but she wasn't well organized. I literally had to cut her stuff apart and tape it together with Scotch tape, and to get the order right. And I figured, well, the acetylcholine has an awful lot to do with verbal behavior and organization. Let's try increasing our levels of acetylcholine. Well, the first thing we tried was a choline chloride drink, and it tasted absolutely awful. This was commercially available at health food stores. I couldn't believe how bad it tasted. I thought we could do a lot better than this. And we came up with a formula. that started out with choline, uh, choline dihydrogen citrate, which didn't taste anywhere near as bad, and some fruit flavoring, but also pantothenate, calcium pantothenate. That's vitamin B5. And the reason for that is the way that your brain makes and your body makes acetylcholine out of choline is with an enzyme called choline acetyltransferase. Your body has lots of acetyl groups in it. That's acetate, like in vinegar. You got lots of acetyl groups, but it has to be picked up by an enzyme that transfers it to the choline, and that enzyme is dependent upon vitamin B5. So we added the B5, and we had something that worked much better than just choline alone. And with a bit of work, we got it to be actually tasty instead of tasty horrible. And that's where mine came from.
Now, and
the lift.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the lift was the result of that first publicity tour. We were going from city to city to city. We rarely stayed more than one night in the same hotel, except in the biggest media centers like New York City. Then we might have a few nights before we moved on to the next one. And the days were very long. We might have to get up for a 7 a.m. news show in the morning and then have a 10 o'clock late night show at night, so we didn't get a whole lot of sleep. And we figured, oh my God, they're going to be sending us out in another few weeks to do another one of these tours, and we've got to do something to provide more energy. And we figured out that, well, what was going wrong is we were using up a neurotransmitter called norepinephrine, also called noradrenaline. It's a relative of adrenaline. It gives you get up and go, and it's very important in the function of your brain. It gives you a lot of energy, and it's also the same nutrients are converted into dopamine, which are involved in effortful memory. And we had to do a lot of effortful remembering of things.
Yes.
And it's involved in goal seeking. So anyway, we came up with LIFT, and that was using a nutrient called phenylalanine, which is a natural amino acid. But in order to convert phenylalanine into norepinephrine and into dopamine, it needs the help of copper, it needs the help of vitamin B6, it needs the help of folate and a bunch of other things. And that's why there's so many things in the LIFT. It's a complicated system for your brain to make those two neurotransmitters out of phenylalanine. And the phenylalanine itself could also be turned into beta-phenethylamine, which is what's called a neuromodulator. It gives an additional boost to the neurotransmitters, to the norepinephrine and to the dopamine. And it worked great. It really gave us a lot of energy.
Durk, you know what's interesting is I think I may have mentioned this in the pre-talk before we got going here, and that is, once I started getting involved in being healthy with the Life Priority products with Greg and Michelle, and I started with the LIFT, and that really got me going to lose 60 pounds, and it gave me all this energy when I used it. But what's interesting, could you explain and all this is good for you, what you're telling me, versus espresso and Red Bull? I mean, I can't think of it. I mean, there's nothing in there that can be anything remotely good for your body.
Okay. Well, actually, moderate amounts of caffeine are good for you, and taurine is good for you. We have that in the LIFT. The amount of caffeine that we have in there is considerably less than 1 cup of coffee, a little more than 1 serving of Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola. But
Durk, Yeah, this is Greg here. When I was introduced to the LIFT and the Mind back in '91, I was skeptical about it because, I was in a sport that you either did it or you didn't on the field. And when I took those two products, I felt it. I felt them in my brain, and I knew that I was on the right path. And I drank a LIFT in Mind right before we got on the air with you. So the good thing about it is you don't have to take more to get the same effect, and they're not addictive, and that's exciting to tell people.
Yeah, it's the caffeine makes your brain more sensitive to norepinephrine, but it doesn't help your brain make any more. That's why the first cup of coffee in the morning gives you a lift. The second cup gives you less of a lift than the first cup. The third cup, it starts making you irritable. The fourth cup, you're starting to get shaky, and it's not really giving you a lift and helping your brain function anymore because you've run out of norepinephrine. You've used the cup. And also, the taurine, we put taurine in lift long before Red Bull existed. I mean, we've had taurine in lift since I think it was 1984, 85 or something like that, long before Red Bull existed. And what taurine does, it's a neuromodulator in addition to being an antioxidant. It prevents excessive sensitivity to norepinephrine. So you get a smoother effect. You don't get the jangly effect. And again, we're talking about a lot lower doses of caffeine than you have in a cup of espresso. A cup of espresso may run 350 milligrams caffeine, 500 milligrams of caffeine, a lot of caffeine. We've got 80 milligrams in 2 capsules of lift or 1 serving of the lift powder.
Greg, I'm sorry, Durk. This is so exciting talking to you about this for me because I start off my day with Mind and Lift together. Why is it? Why is it, and how do they work together to help me? And can I do that more than 3 times a day? Because I'll start off with Lift and Mind in the morning, and then I'll do Lift and Muscle Memory when I go work out, and then later on in the afternoon I'll take Lift and Mind together. Am I overdoing it?
No, 3 times a day is fine. That's equivalent to about 2 cups of coffee. And it's interesting to note that people who drink moderate amounts of coffee, like a couple of cups a day, actually have a lower all-cause death rate than people who don't.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that are good for you, but, of course, too much of anything is not good. And 3 servings of Lift a day is about 240 milligrams. That's about 2 cups of fresh brewed coffee.
Okay, if you to the layman like myself, who I don't have 3 degrees from MIT, and so I don't understand what goes on in my body and in my brain. How does the Mind and Lift, and why did you create Mind, and how they work together?
Well, the way they work is these are designer foods that are specifically designed to provide the nutrients you need to make more of the 3 main neurotransmitters in your brain. Acetylcholine, which Mind helps you to make, and norepinephrine, also called noradrenaline, a version of adrenaline, and also dopamine. And these are 3 main things that communicate information in your brain. Everything that you think, everything that you feel, every emotion that you have is a result of neurotransmitters sending signals in your brain. And this simply helps you to make more of those neurotransmitters so your brain can do more.
Does that capacity, the older that you get, do you lose any of that if you're not taking the Lift or Mind?
Yes, that's very true. As you get older, your brain sort of starts slowing down. And it's not too surprising about that because we're almost every adult nowadays running around in America, most of them anyway, are long past what you might say their a natural expiration date is set by evolution. If you go back to the caves of Ice Age Europe, about 40,000 human remains have been found in those caves. And if you date them as to how old they were when they died, and there's a method called amino acid racialization dating that lets you do so with an accuracy typically plus or minus a couple of years, you'll find out that 1 or 2% of the population made it to the age of 40. A handful of individuals made it to the age of 50. We're simply not evolved to live anywhere near as long as we're doing nowadays. And so evolution hasn't fixed us not to wear out before our time.
Well, and when did you get interested? Because that's so fascinating to me. When did you get interested in your research and development of the aging process and what to do for our bodies to help with that?
Well, in 1968, a friend of mine called my attention to an article about Dr. Denham Harmon's free radical theory of aging. And before then, I'd just taken aging for granted, and it was something that happened. But what Harmon did is he came up with a theory as to the biochemical mechanisms that are involved. Now, there's more to aging than just free radicals. We know that now. But free radicals play a very major role.
Durk, hold on for a second. I got to ask because I'm not familiar with that, and people may not know. What are free radicals? What are those?
Okay, a free radical is a molecule or atom with an unpaired electron. Swapping electrons around are how all chemical reactions work. And the problem with unpaired electrons is they like to go around in pairs. If you have an unpaired electron, the molecule is promiscuously chemically reactive. It'll react with things that you really don't want it reacting with. They're like toxic byproducts. In fact, a lot of toxic byproducts are capable of producing free radicals and causing damage. Like you don't want to get exposed to paraquat or rotenone, which are used for things like killing fish or killing insects or killing plants. The reason being they cause the production of free radicals, and it messes up a lot of things. One free radical, for example, called a hydroxyl radical, it's such a powerful oxidant, it's like fluorine gas at 800 degrees Fahrenheit. It'll eat up anything. It'll destroy your DNA. In fact, if you stood in front of an X-ray machine and got a lethal dose of X-rays, what actually kills you is that the X-rays split water to produce hydroxyl radicals, and they just rip everything up in you.
Wow.
And so you need protection from that, and your body makes a bunch of antioxidants.
Okay.
And there's antioxidants in your foods like vitamin C and vitamin E. The carotenoids, a lot of the bioflavonoids, the stuff that makes cherries red, the stuff that makes strawberries red and berries blue. These can all help protect you from these free radicals.
Okay.
Citrus fruits not only have vitamin C in them, but they also have other compounds like aspartame. One of the reasons that people say, well, eat whole grains is because that outer layer of the grain that's polished off to make white flour, that outer layer contains a polyphenol called quercetin that helps to protect you from these free radicals. Okay. And so eating the right foods is important. And one of the problems with eating the wrong foods or doing the wrong things is that you can end up with a lot more free radicals. Like smoking, for example, really loads you up with free radicals and actually causes premature aging as a result of that, in addition to its effects at causing genetic damage that can produce cancer.
Gotcha. Thank you. So the supplements and what you came up with, we're not getting enough of the things our body needs from food, is why you came up with this and the supplements. I'd like you to get into Life Shield, which I've been on for way over 2 years. And that isn't something that I actually can feel, like I can feel lift or mind, where I can actually have the effect of my day. But I know I'm putting these good nutrients in my body because, as Greg and Michelle told me about, why is Life Shield and what can I hope to gain from taking Life Shield?
Well, I think that Life Shield is going to help you age more gracefully, and it can help prevent certain types of damage that occur that are associated with aging, things like cardiovascular disease and cancer. It's not going to provide 100% protection from you, but it tips the balance a little more in the right direction. And one of the things that you need to keep in mind is that classical vitamin deficiency symptoms are not just what the vitamin is for. Vitamin C is for a whole lot of things other than preventing scurvy. If you don't get enough vitamin C, you start getting the symptoms of scurvy first. But not having enough vitamin C just to prevent scurvy, but no more than that, there's going to be a bunch of unnecessary damage going on.
Gotcha.
Because you need more to get these other effects. Your body will put vitamin C to the most important things first and not have enough to do other things with it that needs to be done. And that's one reason if you're going to be taking more than about an RDA of vitamin C a day, you really need to take it 2 or 3 times a day because it disappears from your blood pretty fast. your body simply doesn't retain it. It pisses the excess out in the urine. That doesn't mean that's useless. It helps protect your kidneys and your bladder and your urethra and so forth.
Yeah, Durk. When people hear about vitamin C, they immediately go and find the cheapest kind, and they normally buy ascorbic acid. And the thing that really impressed me when I started learning more about your formulas was that the vitamin C product that you created has both water and fat soluble vitamin C in there, not ascorbic acid. So I don't tell people not to take ascorbic acid, but the version of the vitamin C that we put in the vitamin C product that you created, the designer food, is very easy on the stomach.
Yeah, right. Ascorbic acid is acidic. And if you're going to take an RDA like 60 or 80 milligrams, that's not a problem, especially if you take it with food, which would be the case if you're, say, eating an orange. On the other hand, if you want to take like a quarter gram or a half gram of vitamin C, and you take that in the form of ascorbic acid, especially if you take it when your stomach isn't full of food, you can get acid indigestion from that. And that's why we supply it in the form of calcium ascorbate. That's neutral. It's not acidic. It's not alkaline. It's right in the middle. It's the Goldilocks just right pH level. Also, calcium from calcium ascorbate is more easily absorbed than calcium from many other sources. And so you get that as an additional bonus. We also have a very interesting compound in there called ascorbyl palmitate. That's a fat-soluble ester of vitamin C, which you get into parts of your body where there's a bunch of fat. Vitamin C does not dissolve in fat. Ascorbic acid or calcium ascorbate dissolves in water just fine, doesn't dissolve in fat. Ascorbyl palmitate dissolves in fat and acts as a very powerful antioxidant synergist there to help make other fat-soluble antioxidants like vitamin E work better.
Gotcha. Thank you. So
now the Life Shield that David had mentioned is basically a multiple vitamin. I hate to say that multiple vitamin because there's like over 25 different nutrients in the Life Shield, and especially the B vitamins. And I think most people are deficient in B vitamins.
Well, yeah, not in the sense of, well, they have pellagra or berry or something like that, but they are lacking in the sense of not having the optimum amounts. Because, like I said, if you have a deficiency syndrome, you're not getting enough to do even the most important things that those vitamins do. Or if you take a little more, those vitamins are going to be doing other things for you beyond protecting you from pellagra or berry or scurvy. In addition to the vitamins, we do have other things in there. For example, we have asparagine, and that is a citrus bioflavonoid. And it's interesting to note that if you give asparagine to adult mice, you can actually unharden their arteries with it.
Whoa!
And hardening of the arteries is a cross-linking reaction. It's a lot like what happens to the windshield wipers on your car when it's left out in the sun and in the ozone pollution. You know, the windshield wipers start out being nice and elastic and soft, and they do a good job of cleaning off your window. But after a whole lot of sun damage and ozone damage, which causes free radical damage, which causes cross-linking in the rubber, just like it causes in your arteries, what happens is that the windshield wiper blades get harder and harder, and eventually they don't clean well anymore. And if you don't change them, they eventually get to the point where they tear. They fail. And you can measure the hardness of arteries in an animal by measuring how fast the pulse pressure wave created by a heartbeat travels through the arteries. And asparagine can actually unharden the arteries in mice. And my arteries are doing very well for my age, and I suspect that's because I've been taking asparagine as part of Life Shield for over half of my lifetime now.
Okay, how old are you, Durk? I got to ask so people know.
I'll be turning 80 this month.
Oh, congratulations! I want to ask you about V-Guard. Okay, and I think it's important when we talk about this that we bring up this now about the Life Priority products. Is the Life Priority, and this is on every single thing, every single product you get of Life Priorities, and the supplements are not intended to diagnose, they're not intended to treat, cure, or prevent disease. They are there, especially V-Guard. When I take V-Guard, Durk, what do I hope the health benefits I get from that to my body?
Well, what it's going to do is to help your body and your immune system react in a more constructive manner to potential viral infections. This is not like an antiviral drug which knocks out the virus. What this does is it helps your immune system perform properly without overdoing it. One of the problems that you have with serious influenza, like the type that came around during 1918, what they call the Spanish flu that killed 20 million people around the world, is the immune system can overreact to it. And this is what happens to a small percentage of the people that get COVID-19, but this is especially true with older people, with people who are obese, people who have diabetes, people who have autoimmune diseases. If your immune system overreacts to it, it can do collateral damage. Your immune system has two parts to it, a very primitive part called the innate immune system and a much more modern part called the adaptive immune system. The adaptive immune system creates antibodies. They're like smart bombs. They're like cruise missiles. They're very precisely targeted to a particular target, to a particular protein molecule called an antigen that the infection causes your body to produce. The innate immune system is a lot more primitive. They're first responders. It takes a couple of weeks for your adaptive immune system to kick in. Your innate immune system can get going within an hour or two. And the problem with the innate immune system is like dropping napalm from a B-52 at 50,000 feet. It'll really burn up that target, but it does a lot of collateral damage.
Gotcha. This leads us to, during this so-called pandemic, that it illustrated that it did affect those with a compromised immune system and then have a higher chance of getting ill. I'm just curious your thoughts about how we can increase our immune system through the use of your designer foods. Again, not prevent, not cure, and not diagnose, but how they can increase our immune system through the use of your designer foods.
Well, I would say that the single vitamin that most people are deficient in, and that's really important for the function of the immune system, is vitamin D. Everybody knows vitamin D is good for your bones. Everybody knows that if you don't have enough vitamin D as a kid, you'll get rickets. That is, your leg bones will be curved. It'll be like you're bow-legged because the bones just aren't strong enough because you don't have enough vitamin D. But it does more than just make you have good bones. It's also very important for proper function of the immune system. And here's the problem. Our ancestors spent a lot of time out in the sun during the spring and summer and fall, gathering food, or later after the agricultural revolution came along, growing food. And we are exposed to a lot of sunlight. And sunlight can make the first step in synthesizing vitamin D in your skin. It takes a relative of cholesterol called ergosterol and activates it. Then that goes to your liver, which hydroxylates it. And that goes to your kidneys, which hydroxylates it again. And then you got vitamin D. But the thing is, people aren't exposed to anywhere near as much ultraviolet light nowadays as our ancestors were even a couple of hundred years ago. A couple of hundred years ago, like 95 to 98% of the population was involved in producing food. Well, thanks to mechanized agriculture and inventions like the McCormick Reaper and the diesel engine tractor, nowadays we got like a couple of percent of the population producing food, and they're sitting in a glass-encased tractor cab with air conditioning and stereo music, and they're not getting any ultraviolet light.
So true.
And then when you go out and play golf or swimming or something like that, you put on the sunscreen because ultraviolet light can cause photoaging of the skin is skin cancer. Well, fortunately, you don't have to make a trade-off between skin cancer and getting enough vitamin D. You could take it as a supplement.
Gotcha.
But most people aren't getting enough. They're getting maybe 400 units a day or thereabouts. I recommend that most healthy adults, they take 2,000 IU a day and take it for 3, 4, or 5 months, then have their vitamin D levels measured. And you don't want to have your vitamin D just above the bottom end of the normal range, because the bottom end of the normal range is way below optimum. You don't want to have it excessive either. What you want to do is have it right about in the middle between those two ranges. Most people are going to probably take about 4,000 IU of vitamin D per day, but bigger people are going to take more.
You know,
and for example, I take about 8,000 units a day. However, that might be too much for some people.
Durk, this is Greg, when Michelle and I got in the industry to offer different formulas to people, I started learning that the use of vitamins after meals is something that most people aren't aware of, that they should be considered to take supplements after meals, because the body's operating 24 hours a day. Can you touch on why people should consider taking supplements more than once a day? Because I think most people that take supplements only do it once a day, and I think that's not enough.
Well, once a day is enough to prevent the classical deficiency symptoms, but it's not enough to give you elevated levels of the water-soluble vitamins. Now, some vitamins like vitamin E and vitamin D and vitamin A are fat-soluble. Your body can store them. Taking once a day is fine. On the other hand, something like vitamin C, for example, if you want to get the benefits of more than an RDA of vitamin C, it really helps to take that 2 or preferably 3 times a day, for the very simple reason that after you take a dose of vitamin C, suppose you take it on an empty stomach, it'll peak in around 3 hours or so, and after 6 hours, it'll be back down to its basic background level. Your body doesn't retain the higher levels of vitamin C. So if you take it 3 times a day, you can maintain elevated levels and get the benefits that you would from that. You don't need to do that to prevent scurvy or beriberi or pellagra or rickets. But if you want to get the full benefits, it's helpful to take 1 capsule per meal rather than 1 per day.
Very good. Thank you. Now we are at 40 minutes now, and I think we ought to talk about 2 different products that are on the list that we sent to you. The one is muscle memory, and the other one is ageless priority. Can you touch on both?
Oh yeah, I can't wait to hear about the muscle memory, Durk, because there's in all the exercising that I do now to keep the weight off and do that. When I take the muscle memory with the lift, man, all of a sudden I'm going for 20, 30 minutes, and I feel like I'm 18 years old again.
Well, in fact, in some ways, yeah. The muscle memory helps your body to make more nitric oxide, which is a good free radical if it's in the right place at the right time. It's what causes a dilation of your blood vessels. It's also involved the release of growth hormone. One of the things that happens as you get older, you release less and less growth hormone, which is why it takes longer and longer to heal injuries. It can also act, the nitric oxide can also act as an anti-inflammatory. And if you take the muscle memory, like about 45 minutes before exercise on an empty stomach, then you exercise, you'll notice that you recover from exercise, you catch your breath, you feel ready to go a lot quicker. That's because your arteries have been dilated. You can carry more nutrients to the muscles, carry more waste material away, carry more oxygen to the muscles, carry more carbon dioxide away. But also helps to prevent the aches and pains you get the next day after a heavy bout of exercise. And that can make a real difference in terms of the amount of aches and pains you have the next day.
You just explained there why now, as a 70-year-old, I'm doing every other day 300 push-ups. and I can recover. Yeah, really.
Holy mackerel!
Really, seriously, and in different forms of push-ups too. But I do it every other day, and doing that, and of course I get tired, and of course, but I recover, but I am not. I do some stretching afterwards, but no, I am not exhausted, tired, sore after doing that. And one day after I on a completely empty stomach, I did the lift and the muscle memory, and I went, okay, I got to stop at 500. That's enough today. I mean, really,
holy mackerel!
That really.
All I can say is if you try doing that without taking the muscle memory, the next day you're going to be sorry.
And I had a friend of mine that was doing that in training for a marathon, and I said, man, you got to try the muscle memory and you got to try the lift together. And after about a month, he goes, man, give me some more of that. Give me some more of that. And then I met him at the halfway.
Yeah, right.
And I met him at the halfway point of the marathon and gave him a bottle of it mixed together. And he goes, I never could have gotten through it without it. So you just explain that. Now here I started taking Ageless. And of course, I don't feel anything like I feel with the lift or the muscle memory or mind. What are the benefits I can hope to get, Durk, from taking Ageless?
Okay, Ageless is designed to fight one of the many aging mechanisms. One of the many aging mechanisms is that sugars in your body can chemically react with proteins, and this is what's a process called glycosylation. And in the process, this forms compounds that are pro-inflammatory. It's part of the process of aging of arteries. It can be involved in causing aches and pains in muscles and joints. It is involved in aging in kidneys. And the problem is that you can't get along without glucose in your bloodstream. You die without glucose. You die of hypoglycemia. On the other hand, the glucose reacts with proteins and forms these toxic products. It's a toxic byproduct. And it's the same with oxygen. You can't get along without oxygen. Without oxygen, you die. But oxygen can also react with molecules in your body, primarily fats, and form free radicals, which damage you. So you can't get along without it, and you can't get along with it either because it slowly does damage that adds up over time. Yeah. And we've got a write up on the website which describes what it can do for kidneys. And one of the most reliable measurements of aging is the decline in kidney function with age. If nothing else gets you, and you're lucky, you never get cancer, you never get cardiovascular disease, eventually you're gonna die of kidney failure. And this isn't going to stop your kidneys from aging, but it will slow it down. And it's amazing how well this stuff works. I've got type 2 diabetes, and this is in spite of the fact that I weigh 190 pounds and I'm 6'4", so I'm a long way from being overweight, let alone obese. Wow. And I also very careful about my diet, low glycemic index, very careful about sugars and readily digestible starches. The problem is I have 6 mutations in genes that control sugar metabolism, which cause me to have type 2 diabetes. The reason I know about those mutations is that as part of an experiment on the biology of aging, I was fully gene sequenced. It comes out to about 3.5 gigabytes of information, but I know my entire genetic sequence, and I've been able to look up what I'm susceptible to. So it's not surprising that even though I eat a very healthy diet and I'm nowhere near being even overweight, I still got type 2 diabetes. Well, the fact that my fasting blood sugar on my latest test is 146 milligrams per deciliter. That's definitely diabetic. On the other hand, my HbA1c, which is glycosylated hemoglobin, that is in the normal range. That came out at 5.3, and pre-diabetic would be. Let me see here. Let me look this up. Pre-diabetic, where you're not diabetic yet, but you're at the risk of diabetes. That's between 5.7 and 6.4%, and Diabetes is when you get up above 6.4%. Like I said, I'm at 5.3%, which is in the normal range, but I've clearly got type 2 diabetes. And the only reason that that's possible is because of the ageless is taking care of the formation of these advanced glycation end products. That's why it's called ageless. These chemical reaction products, these toxic products that are the result of sugars reacting with the amino acids and protein, they're called by scientists AGEs, advanced glycation end products. And ageless is designed to help fight that. And it works a lot better than I ever expected it would.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, for the listeners listening to this incredible information that could help your life and all your friends and family, you can go to lifepriority.com and email us, and we'll be glad to call you back or email you information about our product line. We've only touched on a few of our products that Durk and Sandy created, but Life Priority is where we would like to send people to go to learn more about what we do.
And when people go to the website and see this, and this is one thing that I came up with, to get these supplements in my life is not an expense. It's an investment. I'm investing.
Exactly.
And people need to remember that.
It's like putting the best oil in your car instead of the cheapest oil.
That's exactly right. Now, Durk, before we get out of here, I got to ask you about this.
Let me just mention one other thing. I want to make sure this is clear, is that ageless doesn't cure diabetes. It's not going to lower your blood sugar. It will lower your HbA1c, which is a measurement of how much damage the excess blood sugar is doing to you. I'm taking metformin. I'm taking acarbose. They're both prescription anti-diabetic drugs, but they're not capable of doing the full job. I still have excessive amounts of blood sugar, but I don't have any of the usual symptoms of those excessive amounts. My kidneys are doing great. I don't have any diabetic neuropathy. I don't have lesions on my feet or legs that don't heal, and so I have to have my feet or lower legs amputated. The ageless is helping to protect me, but it does not cure diabetes. You need prescription drugs to treat it.
Yeah, we just released that product recently, as you know, and we're already out. We've already had to reorder because people are getting great results on the ageless priority.
Okay, Durk, I got to ask you about this. This is one of the coolest things and fascinating things about you that I loved. You're on Merv Griffin 150 times. Is that right?
No. I was on Merv Griffin 32 times.
32 times.
That's more times than anybody. Yeah, and that was more than anybody else other than Merv and his band leader. We stopped counting. Sandy and I stopped counting after doing 200 TV shows. So I don't know what our total is, but it was 32 times for Merv Griffin, including being on his last show before he retired.
Oh, no kidding. And what was his reason, you think, for having you on?
For retiring?
No, not for retiring. Why were the people that were watching, they were just so fascinated and interested in the information you were giving them?
Yeah, it was really amazing. A friend of mine, Jack Wheeler, who's been to the North Pole more times than anybody else, he takes tourists there. He was on the Merv Griffin show. He's been all sorts of interesting places around the world with Wheeler Adventures. He told Merv about my study of aging mechanisms and that it was possible to do things to help to counteract some of these and to reduce your risk of getting the bad result before your time.
Sure.
And so I got this call. I was working at TRW Aerospace and Defense Systems as a rocket scientist and aerospace physicist. I got a call from Merv's number 2 guy, Peter Barsacchini, and he asked me if I wanted to be on the Merv Griffin show, and I said no. And he said why not? And I said, I want to be on the Merv Griffin show. They said, don't you want to be famous? I said, no. Why would I want to be famous? And eventually what got it, he said, well, we pay after scale. And I said, what's that? And he said, it was about $450. And I said, what do I have to do for $450? This is in 1978, and $450 back then is like about I don't know, $1,500 now or something like that.
Yeah,
So that was serious money. And he said, "Well, we'll send this big, long, shiny black limousine out to your house, and you get in it, and it takes you to Hollywood, and then you just sit on a couch and you talk to Murph for 15 minutes like you were in his living room." I said, "That's all I have to do for $450?" And that's it. And I said, "Are you going to pay me even if you don't use it?" He said, "We're going to use it." I said, "Will you pay me even if you don't use it?" And he said, "Yeah, we'll pay you even if you don't use it." So I went there, and I talked to Murph for about 15 minutes, and he's a real nice guy, a very smart guy.
Yeah.
And afterwards, he came in and said, I want you to come back and promise me that you'll be back here in 2 weeks." I said, "Look, you don't have to make me feel good. I know you're not going to use this. Nobody's interested in science." And he said, You're wrong." And I said, "Look, nobody's interested in science." He said, "I'm the TV guy. I know about TV shows. I got millions of people watching my show. They're going to love you." And 2 weeks later, I was back. And then he said, here's a bunch of stuff for you." And he gave me like 3 big mail bags. And I said, "What's this?" He said, "They're fan letters."
Whoa.
I said, "Fan letters?" And how many of them are there? He said, "There's about 2,200 of them."
No.
And I said, 2,200 of them? He said, "Yeah." And I said, how many people get that many?" He said, "We've only had one person who got more than that." And I said, "Who was that?" And he said, "Elizabeth Taylor."
Whoa.
Oh, my goodness. And that's how I ended up being on Merv Griffin Show 32 times. And that's how Life Extension happened. I got a call from Warner Books offering what then was a fortune, $45,000 in 1978 money. I mean, you're talking like $150,000 or something like that nowadays for writing a book on aging.
You know, Durk, Greg and I were talking before we called you, and I think all those fan letters and what's going on is people don't want to get sick. People want to feel good, and that's the beauty.
That's right. They want to stay healthy.
And
they don't want to just wait till they get sick and then get cured. It's a lot better not to get sick in the first place.
And that's the beauty of your designer foods to me, what you described, especially with the Ageless and with the Life Shield and with the V-Guard, is the time to start. Again, it's an investment early. How soon these products that you've created that Life Priority sells, at what age can you start teenagers on these? When's a good time to start all this?
Well, in the case of muscle memory, because that increases the output of growth hormone, you want to wait until the person hasn't grown any significantly in height in the past couple of years. You don't want to start them earlier than that because you could call premature excessive growth. There was one would-be Olympic swimmer, a woman. She was 16. She asked me about using the muscle memory. I told her, no, you're too young. Don't do that. You'll start growing real fast. And wait until after you haven't grown any in height for a couple of years, then you can start using it. Well, she went and did it anyway. She grew 2.5 inches in 6 months and decided, whoops, she's right.
Durk, that's what's interesting about your supplements, and you do have cautions on your body, which shows that you really care and are concerned about people being healthy.
Well, in fact, that was the longest chapter in our Life Extension of Practical Scientific Approach. It was an 858-page book, and the longest chapter was a chapter on safety. What was known about how much of this is safe, what are the potential side effects, what do you need to look out for, what conditions, if you have them, you shouldn't use this particular substance, and so forth. The publisher actually wanted to take that out. They didn't want to have that in there. Said, nobody's going to want to read the book with all these warnings in there. And I said, we're not going to allow you to publish the book without this in there. And we had a contract written on matters of safety. They couldn't take stuff out that we thought was necessary for safety. And so they had to leave that in. And I think that really helped sell the book because people could see we're being real upfront about this. Incidentally, there was the shortest chapter in the book was one word. The title of the chapter was, "Is there anything perfectly safe?" And in big letters right in the middle of the page, no. If you take 10 times the normal amount of oxygen, you'll start having convulsions within a few hours and end up dead within much less than 24 hours if you take 10 times the normal amount of oxygen. If you drink 10 times the normal amount of water, you'll end up dead within 24 hours too. And yet you absolutely have to have oxygen. You absolutely have to have water. But the thing is, you could have too much of anything, and that's going to have bad results.
Durk, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and talking to us and explaining why and how you came up with your designer foods. Am I leaving anything out? Is there anything you'd like to share, especially with the Life Priority products, which you've created, that will help people lead a healthier life? I'm just going to turn it over to you if there's anything else you'd like to add right now.
Okay, just very briefly, there's a lot of research being done nowadays on aging mechanisms and what can be done about them, far more than it used to be. That was our number one hope with the book, that it would cause an increase in the amount of research money that was being spent on aging mechanisms. Back when we got involved in this back in 1968, aging science was called gerontology. It was about dealing with the frailties of elderly people and trying to give them a better quality life. But it wasn't anything to do with trying to deal with aging mechanisms or heading off age-related diseases. It was about treating age-related diseases. And back then, there might be a few dozen papers published every year on aging mechanisms. Nowadays, there are thousands.
Wow.
And that's made a big difference. That's something that I'm so glad that our book sold a couple of million copies, because it really got people to realize, hey, aging is caused by knowable things. And if we know enough about them, we can do something about them.
And you've done that.
Yeah.
And you've done that. Durk, you just made me think about something else before we get out here. I wanted to ask you, did you read any of those letters? Open those letters that you got. Was there anything that you?
Oh yeah, we sure did. We at first tried to answer them, but we got overpowered. All told, from the Merv Griffith Show alone, we got over 500,000 letters.
Oh my!
And there's no way we could ever possibly answer those.
There might have been money in there.
We felt really bad about not being able to answer them. But I mean, 2,200. But that was from one show. Oh my goodness! What happens with the next show?
I hope you didn't leave any money in those envelopes. People send you, paying you.
Hey, Durk, there were a bunch, but I'm just curious, and this will be good because you take the mind and muscle memory, so your memory will be good about this. Was there any letters or anything that you recall that you read from somebody that really touched you?
Oh yeah, about half of the letters were from people who had serious illnesses that oftentimes even fatal illnesses, and that was something that we wish we could help all those people. But one of the things people just didn't realize is we're not doctors, we're scientists, not physicians, and there's a difference between the two. And what they needed were physicians, and it's just that really got to me. The other thing that really surprised the heck out of me were how many letters were guys who were going bald and wanted some miracle cure to make them not go bald. And they were really distraught. I mean, they were really distraught.
Oh, that's funny. The book is called Life Extension, A Practical Scientific Approach, Durk Pearson and Sandy Shaw. The products are on Life Priority, and Durk and Greg, you're here. And guys, I have a great marketing tool here right now. So if they get the Lift, Mind, Muscle Memory, Live Shield, V-Guard, and Aegis, it'll come in a black doctor's bag.
Oh, far out. What an idea. I love it. I love it.
Hey, Brother Durk, thank you for your time, man. I can't thank you enough, and especially for your knowledge and how you make human beings and mankind better and healthier. Thank you, man.
Yeah, Michelle and I thank
Okay.
you. Michelle and I thank you too, Durk. It's been wonderful working with you since '91, and we look forward to the next 10 years helping people feel better all across the United States and around the world. Thanks a lot.
Great talking to both of you. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
You too, Durk. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.